G'day guys, today we're down here at Lush Recording Studios. I'm here with Dom and Miro. How are you guys?
How you going?
Good, thank you. Well,
now Dominic, tell us a little bit about the studio.
the studio, well, we opened about just over 12 months ago after about 2.5 years of construction. We've basically finished stage 1. We're currently in the planning stages for the next stage, which is going to be another tracking room and probably another control room. We'll see how it all pans out in the long run, but it was something that I was actually going to do about 30 years ago, build a studio, and it didn't eventuate, and 30 years down the track, or almost 30 years down the track, something happened, and decided to revisit the whole episode, and here we are.
And got it together quite well.
Yeah.
And what was it like in the construction of the place?
Well, we we have an acoustician who did the designs, both acoustic and the actual dimensions of the studio, the size of the floor plan of the studio, and we worked very closely with him right through the entire building construction process. Planning-wise, there's a lot to consider when building a facility like this, both from the whole electrical side of things, the correct, as you'd call, clean power or star earth power for the studio, the cabling of the studio, what sort of cable you use. It's a big job to build a facility like this.
Sounds like there's a lot involved.
There is a lot involved, yes.
And now Miro is your main engineer here.
Oh, I'd like to think he is, yes.
Yeah. Now, how'd you get into sound engineering?
So I started in my bedroom, as most kids do, as a teenager, and really loved playing music, and had a computer and had a really basic version of Pro Tools, and it was a natural progression to want to start capturing and recording the things, the music that we were making. So that kind of led through my school years to then coming to Australia. And I went to the Queensland Conservatorium and did music, and so that was I guess that's the place where I really honed my skills from an educational perspective, and learn about like going from the bedroom, I guess, and just using a computer to then like going to a place like this and learning like the theory of how that works, and practical also in terms of how that works.
And now Pro Tools, was that the main program you used, or were you quite versatile over a couple?
Look, I think I started out with maybe Fruity Loops. What else? I think there was one other. I honestly can't remember. SoundForge. It was this would be sort of maybe in the late 90s, early noughties. So, and then I sort of I got a copy of Pro Tools while I was still at high school, and then that sort of has been my kind of go-to.
Program.
Yeah. I've tinkered with Logic and a few others, but it's I'm fairly institutionalized now. It's difficult to change.
Now tell us a little bit about your gear and your console.
The console, well, first of all, the console came from the ABC studios in Sydney. It was a per chance scenario. We were actually going to put a different console in the room, and this opportunity turned up, so basically we decided to go down the path of an SSL in this room. We already have another SSL for the next studio construction, but that was going to be in a different room to this one. So we've decided to pretty much go down to 2 SSLs as long as we still do the other control room. Gear-wise, outboard, well, I've been a bit of an aficionado for quite a long time on the classic equipment. Everything we own in the studio is original issue. We don't have any reissue equipment at all. All the Pultecs, all the Pis, the Yuri 1176s, everything is basically the first issue of that date. So it's everything. It basically ranges from the 1950s through to the 1980s. We've really haven't pursued a lot in the current crop of modern equipment, purely because of the fact that we don't really need to. I don't think we need to. Neither the boys don't really feel the same as I do. So yeah, it's just been a case of looking around, talking to people, and finding the right bits of a kit for the time being.
And how does it go using these vintage gear? You must feel like in heaven sometimes.
Look at this, it's quite a special thing. Coming in, for the first time and or during construction and through the phases of seeing the desk and all of a sudden having these things at your fingertips are things that, it's stuff that people dream about, So really it's an amazing experience. It's some of the gear is incredibly rare and it's, there's sort of, a lot of it's sort of that folklore thing, like it's, one day I'll get to use like this box or one day I'll get to use that. I think it's important as well also, to keep in mind, like for me that, the end result is still the most important thing and it has to be part of like a great outcome for the song or for the project, which is the most important thing. But certainly having amazing bits of like kit along the way like help incredibly and they sound amazing. They're classic, it's classic gear from the last, as Dominic said, like 50, 60 years. So it's been a great opportunity.
All right, Dom, so we're at your rack mount here. Now, you're saying before these are all classic vintage gear. Can you talk us through some of it?
Sure. Everything we have here is original issue. We haven't gone down the path of any reissues on anything. That's just the way I like to do things. Let's see, what have we got here? For instance, down the bottom, we've got a couple of EAR 660s. Great on bass, great on vocals, and fantastic across a stereo mix. So that's predominantly what they're great on. DBX 160s, one of everybody's favourite comps. Great for snares, great for bass again, also great for vocals, particularly on female. The Compex or the ADR 760 XRS, one of the favourites for getting that John Bonham from Led Zeppelin drum sound. We've got AMEC 9098 mic pre-EQ, some Neve 33116s and some Quad 8 AM12s if I'm correct. I can't remember the exact number of them. They've come from one of the ABC consoles that was parted out. Over here we've got the standard Neve 33609, once again a very favourable bus compressor. Pair of Pi compressors. These have actually come out of the UK. These actual units were used by Peter Gabriel for his So album. A couple of Yuri 1176 Blackface. They're a Rev ABCD issue. And then under that we've got the original first issue of the 1176, which is the Blue Stripe. There's only about 1,000 of those actually produced. We're lucky enough to have 2 of those. Only one's been racked up. Below that we've got a Yuri, or Universal Audio, 175B, which is the tube predecessor to the 1176. And below that is an original LA2A tube comp as well. And that beastie is actually the very last ever first issue that was produced.
And this is only part of it. You've got another rack over here. Should we go have another look at that?
We can try and shoot over that way in a minute, yes.
So Dom, this is the other half.
Yep.
Can you talk us through it?
Well, here we are over here we've got our EQ and our effects. Let me see, start at the top. Well, compressors, distressors or compressor basically. Bit of a standard in every studio these days. Modern classic, I guess you could call them. Below that we have our Culture Vulture, which is the tube, thermionic Culture tube unit, which is great for distortion. Below that the 1979 classic AMS 1580 delay. Below that we have the Lexicon PCM42 delay. Below that we have our Marshall time modulator, GML 8200 stereo bus EQ. Below that we have our Cranesong Ibis, another stereo bus EQ or stereo EQ. Below that we have our Pultec EQP 1A3. And below that we have our Pultec MEQ5, which is a mid-range Pultec EQ. Below that we have a pair of Pultec EQP 1A3s, which is a latter version of the EQP 1A. And below that we have our Transient Designer TD4. We have our Decca dual mono EQs. Once again, a bit of an unknown classic for most people, but certainly a great EQ.
Well, for any more information about Lush, where do we have to go?
Probably the website. Easiest way to get us. Just lushstudios.com.au. Simple.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time, guys. Really appreciate you bringing us out here. We've had a good chat.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate the time as well. Thank you. Cheers.
Wow, well, it looks like Dom's gas or gear acquisition syndrome is pretty out of control. You guys have recorded out at Lush Studios. Did you find that vintage gear was, really all it was cracked up to be? Did you find it was important?
I think it was good to, our last recording was a little bit different, so it was good to get in there and use all the old stuff. I like it, but I'm not the greatest gear hound or anything, so it's all above my head, to be honest.
It's definitely what you style of music you're playing type of thing. If you're a dirty garage band, then you can go home and record on an 8-track and it's fine, for what you're doing.
True.
But yeah, there's bands, that like dubstep or something, you really probably do need all the compressors and equalizer stuff, and yeah.
I like the vintage. Most of the bands I like are from the 70s, 60s, 80s, so I like the vintage sound of that. I suppose that was the initial reason why we went to do it.
Yeah, and you felt that sort of recording with analog gear and old vintage gear kind of gave it that warmer sound you guys were looking for, and definitely that, I suppose, that aged sound or timed sound. It's sort of relevant to what you're playing and sort of gives it that feel, yeah?
That's it, yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And I mean, is that what you guys plan to do in the future? Do you feel that you'll use vintage gear and continue along that sound path?
I'm not really sure.
We're pretty open to suggestions, I think.
Yeah.
It just depends on who the person is who's doing it and what songs we've made up at the time. Rick from R&D was really great to work with.
Legend.
Really good bloke.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we're going to do the next one with him or not, but we just have finished another one with him, so it'll probably be a while before we record again.
Yeah.
We're getting out there and gigging more at the moment.
Okay, great. There's loads more to come, guys. After the break, Jake's going to be heading to Eloise Music to find out about home studio essentials. And a bit later, I'm going to be heading out on location with Australian Concert Productions to find out about setting up live sound for a gig. See you guys soon.